Welcome to this week's weekly webinar. As you know, our advisor team webinars take place every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a pleasure having you with us today. During these webinars, we try and cover topics that are helpful to all our small business owners, topics from management to finance, building business credit, and so on. So it's a joy to have you with us. Keep coming back every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also follow our YouTube channel to get the recordings after the webinar. Well, let's dive in today's topic. The topic today is the art of management. As we view management as challenging as creating outstanding art, we will become better managers. As I thought of today's topic, this jumped out at me, and as we all know, management is not easy. It truly is as difficult as creating art. I am not an artist, so maybe for some of you it's a little easier than others, but you know, it's challenging and it takes practice, it takes dedication, and I think management is the same way. It's constantly changing, our skills are developing, and so forth. So what is management? You know, choose your definition. And I pulled up a bunch of definitions here. I like to get the actual definition of a word. I feel like over time sometimes the true definition can be lost. So today I want you to choose, what is your definition of management? How do you define it? The first definition I found is the process of dealing with or controlling things or people. For example, the management of elk herds. Number two, the responsibility for and control of a company or similar organization. For instance, the management of a great metropolitan newspaper. Number three, the people in charge of running a company or organization regarded collectively. Number four, the treatment or control of disease, injuries, disorders, or the care of patients who suffer from them. For example, the use of combination chemotherapy in the management of cancer. The last one is an archaic definition: trickery and deceit. If there has been any management in the business, it has been concealed from me. And I thought that was a little funny, so I had to add that in there. So how do you define management? Because let's step back and be honest, the way you define management is really how you're going to act in your role of management. So what would your definition be? Maybe it's a combination of some of these. Maybe it is truly defined by one of them. For me, you know, number three stands out. With number one and two, I didn't like the word control in there, but we all define management differently. And within our businesses, we each would have to define management differently because no business is the same. Let's go to our next slide. What are your goals in management, and what is your plan to get there? We had a webinar that talked about goals and how they're just a wish if we don't have a plan. So let's apply that principle here. What are your goals in management? And I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? And what is your plan to get there? Your goals could be something like empowering your team, giving them the ability to grow, the ability to learn, the ability to solve, and the ability to thrive. I don't know, but what is your goal? And do you have a plan to get there? Think about that. I'm going to give you a second here as I go to the next slide. Management starts with you. And that can be daunting because a lot of things, when you're a small business owner, a lot of things start with you. But of course, when we embark upon, you know, that hefty task of starting a business, we take it and we run with it. So management really does start with you. If you think about it, your employees are watching you constantly, the way you handle an email, the way you handle a dispute, as they hear you on the phone or talking with other people, customers, and so on. They're going to take note, either you know, they're going to take note whether it's good or bad. They're going to look at that consciously or subconsciously. They're looking at the way you manage, you know, your relationships with other people within the company, and they're going to mirror that because you're setting the standard. And it's interesting, sometimes we forget that. Maybe we think we're exempt, but truthfully, they'll look at the way the business owner handles their day-to-day business and they justify their actions based on your actions. Some quotes I liked. Somebody has always said what I'm trying to say, so I don't reinvent the wheel, but these are some quotes that I really liked. A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. It is better to lead from behind and put others in front, especially when you celebrate victory when nice things occur. You take the front line when there is danger, then people will appreciate your leadership. And this last one's a great one. A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, "We did it ourselves." And like I said before, every business is so different. So your goals in management are different, and your plan to reach those goals will be different. Um, and you want to make a conscious decision on what your goals are and what type of manager you want to be, what type of behavior you want your employees to engage in. Because the way you handle yourself, they're going to look at that and oftentimes mimic that. And key aspect of management is motivation. Now, something we should ask ourselves regularly about every team member is, what motivates my team? And this is tricky. Think about it. Think about how many personalities you've met in your lifetime, and they are all motivated in different ways. And not only that, they will be motivated in different ways throughout their life cycle. So it's a moving target. This is something you'll want to ask yourself regularly about each of your team members. You might want to write down their names and kind of jot down some ideas on what motivates them. Now, keep in mind, there may be some trial and error in there too to find out what really motivates your team. And as we talked about, everybody is motivated differently, and it's going to take time to find the best way to motivate them. Oftentimes we're put in a place where we need to figure out means of motivation for the team as a whole, not independently. So we have to find a way to motivate everybody with one standard method, which can be difficult. So it may be the way it's presented to that individual that's different. There's several different ways that you could go about motivating people in their own specific way, even with the same motivational process, if that makes sense. Now, I'm going to dive into a specific form of management. There are so many different ways to manage teams and so many different theories and things like that. There's certain methods that have been shown, especially recently, to be very effective. And we have to keep in mind there's different generations and different cultures within those generations. So the process of management has changed over time, and therefore the methods change too, and so forth. But method is typically works for all groups, and it's a method that's been proven to work over and over again. So that's why I selected it today. If it works specifically for your team, great. If not, just take notes of things that work or ideas that you get as you listen to this type of management. And that's our goal, is just to bring more ideas to the table and get you thinking about and stepping back from the day-to-day fires of your business and really thinking about the big picture. So we're going to dive into this type of management style, and the first part of it is talking about autonomy. Now, what is it? See if you can define that in your mind. It's basically the ability to self-govern. So this is a form of management that's been in play for quite some time, and it's also a way, do you manage your relationships with people in your life, your customers, things like that. So we all want to have the ability to decide where we live, where we work, and where we play. We like to have that feeling of choice. And that's something that's a root desire of most individuals, is that deep down desire to make choices for themselves and to self-govern. It's natural for an individual to feel like they will be able to make the best choice for themselves independently. And I think we've all seen this time and time again. When we feel like we were involved in the decision, we feel more ownership. We feel more acceptance to changes and things like that if we're involved in the decision-making process and so forth. So that's the root of this principle, is giving the individual that sufficing that root desire they have to make their own decisions, especially where they live, work, and play. So, can you build that into the workplace? Think about that. Giving them freedom. Can you build that in the workplace? Ask yourself that honestly. How can you build that in the workplace? And not only that, and I mentioned this, this is something that transfers also into personal relationships. This also transfers into the way you work with your customers and so on. So think about it. Can you build this autonomy into the workplace, into your sales process? Can you build this into your systems? So let's drill down further. What does this mean? And especially if you're going to roll this out into your groups, what are the details here? Can you give them freedom in these areas? What they do, how they do it, when they do it, where they do it, and with whom they do it. So, for instance, I could give my team the results I want. I want this task completed, and this is the goal. This is the goal that we're trying to achieve, but I want my team to define what they do to get there, how they do it, when, where, and with whom they achieve these goals. It does not mean that I have to completely step back and not consult and not guide them throughout the process. But what it does mean is that if I believe in this autonomy method, the natural desire of a person is to be involved in decision making, and this empowers these decision makers with that feeling of ownership, with that pride of doing a good job, feeling involved in the decision making instead of simply being told what to do. So let's go back to our question. Can you build that into the workplace? Now you're going to think to yourself, right now you're thinking, oh boy, I would have to have the right employees to trust them to do that. And you're right to a point. Management using autonomy, it sends the message that you trust, care, and expect great things. It holds them accountable. This means you can't just show up and do a halfway job because you have ownership. That's a direct reflection of who you are and what you're doing. So in theory, you're going to get better results from an employee that has autonomy. And there are studies to back that up where they really do see higher performance from these employees that have the autonomy, that have the ability to make these decisions and take ownership of these projects. So do you have to have exactly the right employee to do this? And I'm going to say it like this: none of us are perfect. We're all different. We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses. So we want to find those that not only will succeed in this type of management, but thrive. I also want to throw this out. It's important as a manager to see people for what they can become, not only as they are now. And sometimes we have to reprogram them. For instance, I had an employee early in my career that I was managing, and naively gave him exactly the tasks I wanted done, and I mapped out how he should do them and every little detail of what his job is, how it should be done, and so forth. And I watched over the next couple weeks, and I could see the glazed look come over his eyes as he felt like a robot and a lemming, and so forth. And then I had to step back and realize I was wrong and I made a mistake. And I approached this employee and I said, how are we going to jazz this up? You tell me, what do you think we need to do to do a better job here? You know, you have been dealing with it firsthand. You're there in the trenches, as we like to say. So you tell me, what ideas do you have? How can we improve? How would you do this differently? And all of a sudden, his eyes turned on, and you could see the wheels spinning, and he had all these thoughts and ideas that I had stifled on how to do a better job. And in the long run, he did a better job than I had outlined. He took ownership. He grew into this position, and he developed it day by day into a very effective position. So it was a good learning experience for me, where I saw, when I was very detailed and gave exact instructions, how I kind of put out the fire. And by stepping back and removing all those barriers, simply giving him the results that I wanted to achieve, and giving him the ability to make the decision on how to get there, definitely pushed him to learn and to grow. And in return, I got more results out of the company. Okay, so I guess the point of that story was, it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the right employee. I think you will be surprised by the way an individual will react. I think at first there is a little adjustment period, because we are showing them trust. We are showing them that we think highly of them, and we expect a lot out of them. There's going to be an adjustment period where they're used to getting definite instruction, and they're unsure, and they'll fumble a little bit, but give them time. It takes time for this type of process to work, but once it catches fire, it keeps going, and you can see them learn and grow, which is a wonderful thing to see as a manager. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit when I was discussing the last slide. It's basically a results-only work environment, a row, and you'll see a lot of reviews on this type of management style and so forth, and it gets rave reviews. Basically, you define the result that you would like clearly, and they determine how to get there. So you tell them, this is what I expect, this is the goal, this is where I want to get, this is the result I want, and you explain it clearly. There's nothing worse than guessing what somebody wants, so instead of doing that, you define exactly what you want very clearly, but you allow them to determine the way to get there, and you make sure you provide the resources needed, and you communicate clearly what you expect. Now, that's not saying you totally step back. It's important as a leader to guide, to nurture, and things like that. So you're going to hold meetings where you hear how things are going, and you just support them in their actions, or you'll guide them to other solutions. That's a great idea, but I'm going to throw something out. If we did it this way, do you think it would give us better results? And they can think about it, you can guide them, and things like that, to get better, to share your wisdom with them, or to challenge them to think even more. Now, the next part of this management style is transparency. Transparency breeds a significantly higher level of motivation and commitment, because it speaks directly to the level of trust in the workplace. What do I mean by that? Transparency. By showing the employee the direct effect that they have on the company as a whole. Because giving an employee autonomy, it gives them a sense of ownership. It gives them a sense of control and so forth. When that same employee can see their effect on the company as a whole, they are that much more motivated to do great things. So offering transparency shows an employee the direct correlation between their role and the company's bottom line performance. That can be tailored. Every business is different, right? But it is important that your employee can see how they stack up, what their contribution is, and when they're doing an outstanding job, and when things have been okay, and it's important that they can see those trends, that they may even be able to compare them against other roles, and so forth. Now, that's not easy to do. I know that's hard. to think about giving an employee that type of transparency. But keep in mind, you're going to keep some controls in place. That doesn't mean you give them your full financial statement or so forth, but you outline ways for them to be able to see what their work does to the bottom line or how they stack up, these type of things. There are some where they are strictly motivated by those numbers. You know, there are some employees out there that the money is nice, but knowing that they're wonderful according to the numbers is all the motivation they need. So once again, we're catering to multiple different ways to motivate an individual. But overall, by providing transparency, you're going to increase productivity as your employees can see exactly how they affect the business and so on. Now, it's not easy, as this slide says, and most small business owners feel that their team isn't entitled to that information. I built this company, it's mine, I worked hard for it, I stay up all night and worry, and that information is mine, not yours. You're right to a point, you know, and you want to keep control over some things, and you have to protect against fraud and different items, but I challenge you to step above that to a point and really let them feel a sense of ownership in what they're doing, feel like they're part of the team and that you trust them because they're involved in your company, and give them that sense of pride too, that they are part of this team. They're part of building this company into what you want it to become. You share the same goals. How much easier is it to manage somebody that has the same goals and ambitions as you do to increase that bottom line? And so forth. You can see how it puts those within your team in line with your ultimate goal and is part of your plan to get there. So it's not just a wish, we have a plan. Now let's go to our next slide. It talks about retaining, building, and improving. Once you have your management style in place, you want to retain your team, and it's important to realize that your management style will build, develop, and improve, that it flexes and bends. We can't be rigid. There's not one thing that will always work. Your team will always change. Things that motivate them will change, and so forth. Things need to be fresh. It's natural for an individual to get bored. You know, if things stay the same all the time, it gets stale, and things may need to be presented in a different way to gain a reaction. So it's important to realize that your goal is to retain your team. It's so expensive to hire a new employee, get them trained, and it takes a year before they're really comfortable. If we keep that in mind and we look at our team now and maybe some of the flaws they may have now, look at who they can become and nurture them until they fulfill that role. Now, I will also say this, there are times when a team member simply won't fit, where their skill set is not blending, where maybe they've made decisions that make it so they shouldn't be employed there. And for the benefit of the team and the morale and to reach those goals, it's better to deal with that situation right away so that it doesn't spread like fire. And you know, that's an unfortunate position to be in. That's hard as a manager, but that once again goes back to one of our quotes. We have to stand up, you know, during those hard times and be a leader and deal with those hard situations with grace, essentially, and you know, keep the team safe and keep them working towards those goals. So that in a nutshell is this management style of autonomy and transparency. And I hope you were able to gather some ideas for what your goals are as a manager and so forth. You'll find that these principles are very applicable to sales also, that people like to have that feeling of freedom, you know, in making decisions and so forth. And we'll make this a topic for another webinar, which is the power of a question. It's so powerful, and you can use it with your employees too. By asking questions, you're guiding them to the result and consulting them there. So that can be used in sales, that can be used in management and so forth. And we'll have to do another webinar to talk about in detail how to do that. But I hope you got good ideas today. It really is a pleasure to have you with me here. Let's see if we have any questions today. I don't see any. So anytime you do have questions on the program, the Business Finance Suite software, and so on, please feel free to call the advisor team. We are always here to help. You can call us toll free at 800-497-0499 or send an email, advisor@businessfinancesuite.com. If you ever have an idea on a topic you would like to cover, feel free to contact the advisor team and we will make that happen for you. So again, thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening and please join us again next week.